I never imagined a single phone call could unravel my world, but that's exactly what happened on a crisp Saturday morning in my cozy Denver apartment. The sun streamed through my window, casting golden patches on my coffee table, where my mug steamed beside a half-read novel. I was savoring the quiet, lost in the rhythm of a perfect weekend when my phone buzzed Mom's name glowing on the screen. I answered with a grin, expecting her usual chatter about grocery lists or Dad's latest business venture. Instead, her voice carried a strange, formal edge that made my stomach twist before she even spoke my name. Peyton. Honey, she began, her tone clipped. Your father and I love you very much. You know that? I sat up, clutching my mug tightly. What's going on, Mom? My heart thudded as she hesitated, then plunged into the news. Dad's 60th birthday celebration, planned for next weekend at the upscale Riverside restaurant, was having its guest list refined. I'd had the date circled in red on my kitchen calendar for months, a milestone I'd been eager to celebrate. We're making some cuts, she said, her words sharp as glass. Important business contacts are coming, and we've decided it's best if you don't attend this time. The mug nearly slipped from my hands. Excuse me, I managed, my voice thin. She rushed on as if speed could soften the blow. We see you all the time, Peyton. This is about your father's business. We'll have you over for a barbecue later, okay? My pulse roared in my ears. Are Jake and Melanie still invited? I asked, naming my older siblings. A pause. Well, yes, she admitted. But they're not Dad's business partners either. I snapped sharper than I meant. Peyton, you're so quiet at parties, she said, as if that justified it. You prefer your privacy, don't you? Before I could respond, Dad's voice boomed through the speaker, gruff and impatient. Peyton, be reasonable. Your brother and sister need to network. One of them will take over the company someday. The truth hit like a slap. I wasn't part of their vision. Not now, not ever. My role in the family was ornamental, expendable. Without another word, I ended the call, my thumb trembling on the screen. The apartment felt too small, the air too thick. I stared at the calendar, the red circle mocking me. My coffee had gone cold, mirroring the chill settling in my chest. They'd chosen strangers, business associates over me, their daughter. The betrayal stung deeper than I could name a wound that whispered I wasn't enough. I sat frozen, the weight of their words pressing down, wondering how a family could make you feel so invisible. The sting of my parents' rejection lingered like a bruise, but by mid-morning, a spark of defiance flickered in me. Daring to burn brighter, I was still reeling, curled on my couch in my Denver apartment, when I realized I couldn't just sit here letting their words define me. My phone felt heavy in my hand, but I dialed Lisa, my best friend whose voice was a lifeline. They did what she exploded when I recounted the call, her outrage, a balm to my raw nerves. As she ranted, my gaze drifted to the window and I froze. There in the courtyard below gleamed a black SUV, its massive red bow glinting in the sunlight. A gift I'd spent 2 years saving for, meant for Dad's birthday. I'd taken extra shifts, skipped vacations, and haggled with the dealership to make it perfect. Now it stood as a monument to my naivety, and something inside me snapped. Lisa, I'll call you back. I said, a plan forming like a gathering storm. I dialed my boss Mark at the architectural firm where I'd been grinding away on the West Side project. Mark, can I take my vacation time starting Monday? 2 weeks, I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Perfect timing. He replied, his tone warm. You just wrapped up West Side. Take the break. Peyton, relief surged through me. Next, I called Lisa again. Can you come over now? Bring your camera gear. I'm keeping the SUV and we're going on a road trip. Her squeal of excitement nearly deafened me. I'm there in 40. Lisa arrived, her arms laden with photography equipment, her eyes widening at the SUV. That's what you got for your dad? It's gorgeous, she said, circling it like a kid at a car show. Was for him. I corrected, a wry smile tugging at my lips. Now it's mine tomorrow. We're driving it across the country. Lisa's face lit up. Seriously, I'll bring my professional gear, shoot landscapes for my portfolio. I nodded, the idea crystallizing. You shoot, I'll drive. No thinking about my family. She grabbed her camera. First, let's get shots of you with your new ride. For an hour, we played models and photographers in the courtyard. I posed beside the SUV, leaning against its sleek frame, sitting on the hood, sunglasses perched on my nose. Lisa's camera clicked, capturing my defiance in every frame. I chose the best shot, me standing tall, hand on hip, looking like I owned the world, and posted it on Instagram. The caption was sharp, deliberate. This was supposed to be a gift, but when someone doesn't want you at their party, you keep the presents. Comments flooded in, friends demanding details, emojis of shock, but I ignored them, a quiet satisfaction warming me. My phone rang an hour later. Mom's name flashing. "Peyton, what are you doing?" she demanded, her voice a mix of fury and panic. "Take that post down. You're embarrassing us." I could hear her shift to a sweeter tone, manipulative as ever. "We've reconsidered. We'd love for you to come to the party and bring that lovely gift." I laughed softly, but coldly. "No thanks, Mom. I've got plans. And the car's mine now?" I hung up before she could argue, my heart racing but resolute. Lisa, sorting her camera gear, raised an eyebrow. "You okay?" I nodded, feeling the weight of my choice settle. "Pack tonight," I told her. "We leave at dawn." As I stood by the SUV that evening, its keys heavy in my hand, I felt a shift. This wasn't just about a car or a trip. It was about reclaiming my worth, refusing to be the afterthought in my own family. The road ahead promised freedom, and for the first time since that morning's call, I felt ready to claim it. Dawn broke over Denver like a promise, painting the sky in hues of peach and gold as I slid into the driver's seat of my SUV, its leather interior still carrying that intoxicating new car scent. Lisa, bleary-eyed but buzzing with excitement, tossed her suitcases and camera gear into the trunk, her grin as wide as the open road ahead. Yesterday's defiance had ignited this journey, but now, with the city shrinking in my rearview mirror, I felt something new, freedom sharp and exhilarating, urging me to outrun the ache of my family's rejection. As we hit the highway, the SUV purring beneath me, I wondered if 500 miles could mend a heart bruised by those who should have cherished it most. Lisa fiddled with her camera, mounting it on the dashboard to capture the sunrise spilling over the Rockies. "Eagle Ridge first," I suggested, my voice light, as if I could outpace the sting of Mom's last call. "Perfect," Lisa replied, already adjusting her lens. The miles melted away, the SUV handling every curve with a grace that made my chest swell with pride. This wasn't just a vehicle. It was my rebellion, my stake in a life I'd define. By noon, we'd crossed into Wyoming, the landscape unfurling in rolling hills and crystalline lakes. Eagle Ridge's overlook was breathtaking, a panorama of emerald slopes kissing a sapphire sky. Lisa leaped out, tripod in hand, her enthusiasm infectious. "Get in the shot, Peyton," she called, and I obliged, leaning against the SUV's hood, wind tousling my hair, feeling like I belonged to this moment, not my family's expectations. Lisa's camera clicked, freezing my newfound boldness in time. I selected a photo, me sunglasses glinting the vast vista behind me, and posted it on Instagram with a caption that cut like a quiet blade. "Some gifts are better appreciated on your terms." Notifications pinged, friends flooding my feed with questions, but I silenced my phone, savoring the open air. We drove onto Lakeside Point, its shimmering waters framed by ancient pines. Lisa worked her magic again, capturing me perched on the SUV, carefree in a way I hadn't felt in years. Another post, another caption. Finding my path, 1 mile at a time. Each photo was a declaration, a signal to my parents that I wasn't invisible, not anymore. That evening, as we grabbed burgers at a roadside diner, my phone rang an unfamiliar number. "Peyton, it's Robert Daniels," came a deep, familiar voice. My father's oldest friend, a towering figure in his construction empire, had always treated me with a warmth my parents rarely spared. "I saw your posts," he said, his tone serious. "What's going on?" I hesitated, then poured out the truth, the uninvitation, the business-first excuse the SUV I'd kept. He listened, his silence heavy with judgment, not of me, but of them. "That's not right, Peyton," he said finally. "Enjoy your trip. Be safe." I hung up a knot, loosening in my chest, only to tighten again, when Mom called an hour later, her voice shrill. "Robert's not coming to the party. Peyton, he's our biggest investor, and you've stirred up trouble with your childish posts." I kept my tone even. "I told the truth, Mom." That's all I ended the call. My hands steady, the diner's neon glow reflecting my resolve. Lisa raised her milkshake to the road, she said. and I clinked my glass. Feeling the miles ahead beckon. The morning of Dad's 60th birthday, I woke in a Wyoming motel, the sun filtering through thin curtains, casting stripes across Lisa's sleeping form. A year ago, I'd pictured myself at Riverside Restaurant, toasting Dad with a smile, the SUV's keys in a velvet box. Now, 700 miles from Denver, that dream felt like a stranger's memory. Yet as I sipped bitter motel coffee, a quiet thrill pulsed through me. I was here carving my own story while my parents faced the consequences of their choice. Today wasn't about their celebration. It was about mine, etched in the trails of a national park and the click of Lisa's camera. We drove to Yellowstone, its geysers hissing and peaks piercing the sky. Lisa snapped photos of ancient trees and misty valleys, her excitement a steady anchor. I posed by the SUV at a lookout, the park's wild beauty framing me, and posted the shot with a caption that carried a subtle sting, celebrating what matters far from those who don't. My phone buzzed with likes, but I ignored them, focusing on the trail ahead. At noon, Mom called, her voice frayed. "Peyton, this has to stop," she said. "Pastor Williams called Dad, Robert told him everything, and now he's refusing to attend tonight, saying we lack family values." I couldn't suppress a laugh, sharp and unbidden. "So the pastor has better principles than you?" I asked. "This isn't funny," she snapped. "You've humiliated us." My voice hardened. Humiliation is being told strangers matter more than your daughter. I hung up, my pulse racing, but a strange calm settled over me as Lisa and I hiked deeper into the park. That evening, in a hotel restaurant with checkered tablecloths, I gave in to curiosity and opened Melanie's Instagram. The photos hit harder than I expected. Riverside's banquet hall, meant for 100, held barely 15 people. Mom's smile was tight, Dad's eyes distant, Melanie and Jake stiff beside them, everyone pretending joy in a room echoing with absence. Lisa peered over my shoulder. "That's sad," she said, but pity didn't come. Instead, a fierce vindication surged through me. They'd chosen business over me, and now their precious connections had vanished. I posted another photo from Yellowstone, me laughing by the SUV mountains behind me with the caption, "Some parties aren't worth attending." The notifications exploded, but I set my phone face down, savoring my steak and the clarity of my choice. Lisa and I planned tomorrow's route over dessert, the road trip weaving us tighter together. My family's drama felt distant, a storm I'd outrun, yet as I scrolled through comments later, a message from Melanie flickered on my screen. "Dad's party is tonight. You should be here. Family is family." I showed Lisa, who snorted. "She didn't fight for you when they cut you out." I nodded, deleting the message. Yellowstone's vastness had reminded me of my resilience, and I wasn't turning back. As we clinked glasses, toasting to the journey, I realized I wasn't just escaping my family. I was building a life where I mattered 1 mile, 1 photo, 1 choice at a time. The Wyoming sky burned crimson as Lisa and I drove toward Montana, the SUV's tires humming a steady rhythm that couldn't quite drown out the unease creeping into my bones. Yellowstone's wild beauty had fortified my resolve, but a nagging instinct whispered that my family's anger was far from spent. 900 miles from Denver, I'd carved out a space where I felt whole, yet the weight of their rejection lingered, a shadow I couldn't outrun. As Lisa adjusted her camera lens, capturing the dusk, I gripped the wheel tighter, sensing the road trip's carefree spark dimming under the threat of what awaited back home. Aunt Patricia's call came as we checked into a modest motel off I-90, its neon sign flickering in the twilight. "Peyton," she said, her voice taut. "Your father's furious. He's talking about confronting you when you're back. Be careful, honey." My stomach churned, but I thanked her, hanging up with a resolve that felt like steel. I dialed Mrs. Grayson, my landlady, her warm tone, a comfort. "Mrs. Grayson, it's Peyton. I need a favor. My parents have keys to my apartment. Can you change the locks before I return?" I asked, explaining the family rift without diving into details. "Consider it done," she assured me, "and I'll tell the concierge to keep them out." Gratitude steadied me, a small victory in a battle I hadn't chosen. Days later, Charlie the concierge greeted us at a Utah rest stop where we'd paused to stretch our legs. I'd asked him to update me, and his call painted a chilling picture. 3 days ago, your brother and sister showed up with spray cans like they meant to tag your place. He said I stopped them per Mrs. Grayson's orders. My breath caught Jake and Melanie stooping to vandalism. And yesterday, Charlie continued, an older couple came angry. The man shouted about family loyalty. I threatened to call the cops, and they left my parents. The betrayal cut deeper, their audacity a stark reminder of their disregard. Thank you, Charlie, I said, my voice steady, despite the tremor in my hands. That night, as Lisa edited photos in our motel room, a text from Jake lit up my phone. You've ruined everything. Hope you're happy, I showed Lisa, who frowned. What's he mean? She asked. Probably Dad's business. I replied, a pang of guilt flickering before I smothered it. Their choices, not mine, had led to this. We posted fewer photos now, the road trip's initial defiance giving way to a quieter strength. At a Montana overlook, Lisa snapped a final shot of me by the SUV. The horizon vast behind me, I captioned it simply, choosing my peace. As we drove on, I felt the journey nearing its end, my heart ready to face Denver, not as their daughter, but as myself. Back in Denver, the city's skyline felt both familiar and foreign, as if the 200 miles I'd traveled had redrawn my place in it. The SUV glided into my apartment's lot, its gleam undimmed by dust and time. Charlie rushed out, confirming the locks were changed, his nod a quiet reassurance that my boundaries held. 3 months later, at 28, I'd woven a new rhythm into my life projects at the firm earned me praise. Lisa's photos from our trip adorned her studio, and my family's calls had faded to silence. Yet as I sipped coffee on my balcony one afternoon, a news alert froze me. Wilson Construction halts riverfront project amid funding. Woes. My father's empire was crumbling, and I wondered if I'd unwittingly swung the first blow. The article detailed how Robert Daniels' withdrawn investment had gutted Dad's ambitions, a loss tied to his risky ventures, and implicitly to me, guilt tangled with relief. A knot I couldn't untie. Aunt Claire's call that evening didn't help. Peyton, your vindictiveness is hurting your parents, she said, her voice icy. I took a breath, steadying myself. I wasn't vindictive, Aunt Claire. I shared the truth they chose business over me, not once, but always. I'm done being their afterthought. Her silence was deafening, her stiff reply. They deserve better, met with my own. So do I. I ended the call, the city lights below a canvas for my thoughts. Had I gone too far? The question gnawed, but I pushed it aside, unwilling to shrink again. That night, Mrs. Grayson called, her voice apologetic. Mr. Daniels is here, says he's your father's friend. My heart skipped, but I let him up. Robert stood at my door, his kind eyes softening the weight of his presence. Peyton, he said. Stepping into my modest apartment, I wanted to check on you. Over coffee, he explained his decision to pull funding, his words measured. Your father's been reckless for years, ignoring advice. What he did to you was the final straw, but not the only reason. Relief washed over me, his validation a balm. He blames you entirely, Robert added, almost rueful. Of course he does, I said, a bitter edge to my smile. But I admire you. Peyton, standing up wasn't easy. His words lingered, a quiet absolution as he left. The next day I drove the SUV to Lisa's studio, its curves catching the Colorado sun. Lisa greeted me with a grin, her prints of our trip now selling to decorators. You seem lighter, she observed, pouring wine. I am, I said, clinking glasses. I know I did right by myself. The SUV, once a gift for Dad, was now my emblem of independence, each mile driven a testament to my worth. We toasted to visibility and real family values, the kind built on respect, not obligation. My parents, Jake, Melanie, they might never see me as enough, but that was their loss, not mine. That night, I cruised along the coast windows, down the Pacific's salt air mingling with my music. The SUV hugged the road, a partner in my liberation. I thought of Robert's words, Lisa's loyalty, my colleagues' praise, people who saw me truly. My family's approval, once a tether was a chain I'd broken. The road trip, the posts, the locks, they weren't revenge but reclamation. A stand for a life where I wasn't less than. As Denver's lights faded behind me, I smiled the road ahead, mine to claim every mile a step toward a Peyton who mattered to herself most of all.
The invitation arrived in a cream-colored envelope, thick and expensive, smelling of designer perfume and old money. Inside, embossed letters announced the Whitaker family reunion at the estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. For years, I had thrown these invitations away without a second thought. But this time, I slipped it into my purse and smiled. You see, my family had spent decades treating me like a failure. The poor cousin who rented apartments while they owned mansions, the divorced woman without a real career, the one they whispered about at Thanksgiving dinners and pitied at weddings. They had no idea what I had been building in silence. And this year, I was finally ready to show them the truth. The Whitaker family had always been what people in Connecticut called old money, though the reality was more complicated. My grandfather built his fortune in commercial real estate during the 1970s, buying shopping centers and office buildings when nobody wanted them. He taught me that wealth meant responsibility, that buildings were meant to house communities, not just collect rent checks. But when he passed, that philosophy died with him. My aunts and uncles turned the family name into a competition. Who had the bigger house in Fairfield County? Whose children attended the best prep schools? Whose vacation photos from the Hamptons got the most likes on social media? Status became oxygen, and if you could not prove your worth with marble countertops and luxury cars, you simply did not matter. I learned this early. At 12 years old, I showed up to Thanksgiving dinner in a sweater from Target while my cousin Harper wore Burberry. Aunt Lorraine pulled my mother aside and whispered loud enough for me to hear that it was embarrassing, that we needed to try harder. My mother cried in the car on the way home. I decided that day that their approval was not worth chasing. But that did not stop them from reminding me, year after year, that I had fallen short. When I dropped out of law school to study real estate development, they called it quitting. When I got divorced at 29, Aunt Lorraine said I had wasted my only chance at stability. When I chose to rent a small 2-bedroom apartment in Stamford instead of buying a house I could not afford, Uncle Gerald joked at Christmas that I would be a renter forever. Nobody asked what I was doing with my time. Nobody wondered why I attended every zoning board meeting in 3 counties, or why I spent weekends walking through abandoned properties with contractors twice my age. They saw my thrift store coats and 10-year-old Honda and assumed I was struggling. And I let them think that, because their assumptions became my armor. The less they expected, the less they interfered. This year, though, something had shifted. I had spent the last 6 years building Whitestone equity from nothing. I had acquired 7 properties, renovated dozens of units, and created affordable housing in communities that desperately needed it. My firm was small but profitable, and more importantly, it stood for something beyond profit margins. And 3 years ago, I had made the most significant purchase of my career. A newly renovated apartment complex in Greenwich called Whitaker Residences. The irony was not lost on me. The building sat just 2 miles from the family estate, a beautiful brick structure with 24 units, updated plumbing, energy-efficient windows, and rents stabilized below market rate. I had bought it quietly through my LLC during the pandemic when the previous owner needed to sell fast. I had poured everything into making it a place where people could actually afford to live with dignity. What I had not advertised, what nobody in my family knew, was that 6 of those units were occupied by Whitakers. Aunt Lorraine and Uncle Gerald downsized there after his investments soured. Harper moved in after her husband's tech startup collapsed. Even my parents quietly relocated there when my father's retirement fund took a hit during the market crash. They had no idea their landlord was me. The management company handled everything. Rent checks went to a corporate address. Maintenance requests were answered by staff. I had kept my distance intentionally, not out of spite, but because I knew the moment they discovered the truth, everything would change. Now, standing in my office with that cream-colored invitation in my hand, I realized I was ready for that change. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I was finally unafraid. After years of being invisible, I was ready to be seen. Not as the failure they imagined, but as the woman I had become. And so, I decided to attend the reunion. I arrived 30 minutes late on purpose. Late enough that the champagne was flowing and inhibitions were lowered, but early enough to make an entrance. The Whitaker estate looked exactly as I remembered. Sprawling green lawns, white columns, gravel driveway lined with luxury vehicles. A Tesla, two Mercedes, a Porsche Cayenne, and Uncle Gerald's ridiculous Range Rover that he claimed was for off-roading but had never seen dirt. I parked my modest hybrid sedan down the road and walked the rest of the way. My navy dress was simple, bought on sale at Nordstrom Rack. My sandals were from Target. My hair was pulled into a low bun. I looked exactly like what they expected, the poor relation who could not afford better. The party was set up on the back lawn under white canopies strung with lights. Everyone looked sun-kissed and polished, dressed in what the invitation had called summer formal. Linen blazers, floral sundresses, expensive sunglasses perched on perfectly highlighted hair. They stood in clusters, laughing too loudly, wine glasses catching the afternoon sun. Aunt Lorraine spotted me first. Her eyes widened with surprise before she quickly composed herself into a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Kira! Oh my goodness, we were not sure you would make it. Did you have to get time off from work?" She said the word work like it was something quaint and slightly embarrassing. "I managed to fit it in," I replied evenly. "Still doing that consulting thing?" she asked, waving her hand vaguely, diamonds glittering on her wrist. "Still at it," I confirmed. I did not mention Whitestone Equity. Not yet. Uncle Gerald raised his glass as I walked past. "Look who finally decided to join the family. We thought maybe you were allergic to us, Kira." "Just wanted to make sure I was really missed," I said lightly. The judgment was everywhere, subtle but unmistakable. Eyes scanning my outfit from head to toe, whispered comments behind cupped hands, the same dance we had done for decades. I was the charity case, the cautionary tale, the example of what happened when you did not marry well or follow the family blueprint. We sat down for lunch at long picnic tables draped in white linens. Servers brought out grilled salmon, arugula salads, and bottles of Sauvignon Blanc that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget used to. The conversation flowed easily around me. Stories about vacation homes and private school applications and stock portfolios. Then Harper leaned in. My cousin had always been the prettiest, the most confident, the golden child who could do no wrong. She had recently closed on a 4-bedroom colonial in the suburbs and had not stopped talking about it on social media for 3 months. "So Kira," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "are you still renting?" The table quieted slightly. A few heads turned. "I am," I said simply, taking a sip of iced tea. Someone laughed. "You are what, 35 now? Do not you think it is time to stop throwing money away and build some equity?" Harper adjusted her diamond bracelet, a gift from her mother-in-law. "Seriously, Kira, you need to grow up and invest in your future. Renting is just burning cash." Another cousin chimed in. "The housing market is insane right now. If you do not already own property, you are basically locked out forever." I set down my glass slowly. They were all watching me now, waiting for me to shrink, to make excuses, to play the role they had written for me years ago. Instead, I leaned forward and smiled. "You are absolutely right," I said calmly. "The market is tough. That is why I decided to take a different approach." Harper raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" I paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make them uncomfortable. "Instead of buying a house," I said slowly, "I bought the building." Forks froze midair. Wine glasses paused at lips. The laughter died instantly. "What building?" Aunt Lorraine asked, her voice sharp. I turned and pointed across the lawn toward the row of brick townhouses visible in the distance, the ones where most of my family now lived. "That one," I said. "Whitaker Residences. Every single unit." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Faces that had been flushed with wine and laughter turned pale. Harper's mouth opened and closed like she was trying to form words, but had forgotten how language worked. "You are joking," Aunt Lorraine finally said, forcing out a brittle laugh. "Kira, that is not funny." "I am not joking," I replied calmly. Uncle Gerald leaned forward, his expression shifting from amusement to suspicion. "You are telling us that you own Whitaker Residences? The entire complex?" "Through my firm, Whitestone Equity. I purchased the property in October of 2020 during the market dip. We renovated all 24 units, updated the electrical systems, replaced the plumbing, installed energy-efficient windows, and brought in local contractors for the work." Harper's voice came out strangled. "You are saying you bought that building? The whole thing?" I nodded. "Closed on it 3 years ago." "That is impossible," she whispered. "You were still renting that tiny apartment. You did not have that kind of money." "I did not advertise what I was doing," I said. "I was busy building something real instead of posting about it on Instagram." The insult landed. Harper flinched. They were all doing the math now, rewinding through years of family gatherings, trying to reconcile the woman they had dismissed with the reality sitting in front of them. They remembered the surface. My secondhand furniture, my practical car, my absence from their country club brunches. But they had never asked about the late nights, the zoning meetings, the properties I was quietly acquiring and improving. "So we pay you rent?" Harper's voice was barely audible, thick with humiliation. "Indirectly, yes, through the management company. I kept my ownership private for exactly this reason. I did not want it to become a spectacle." The weight of that statement settled over the table like fog. Every rent check they had written, every maintenance request they had submitted, every lease renewal they had signed had quietly landed on my desk. The cousin they had pitied for years was their landlord. Aunt Lorraine's face had gone from pale to red. "This is manipulation. You hid this from us deliberately." "I kept my business private," I corrected. "There is a difference. And frankly, none of you cared enough to ask what I was actually doing with my life. You just assumed I was failing because I was not performing success the way you expected." Uncle Gerald cleared his throat, clearly trying to regain some control. "Well, what are you planning to do now? Raise our rents? Evict us?" "Why would I do that?" I asked genuinely. "You are good tenants. You pay on time, mostly. You take care of the units. I prefer stable, long-term renters. It is better for everyone." Harper slammed her glass down, wine sloshing over the rim. "Then what was the point of this? You just wanted to humiliate us?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something unexpected. Not anger, but sadness. "No, Harper, I wanted you to see me. Actually see me. Not the version you invented to make yourselves feel superior, but the real person who has been here all along." Nobody knew what to say. For once in their lives, the Whitakers were speechless. I stood up slowly, placed my napkin on the table, and smiled. "Enjoy your lunch. The salmon looks wonderful." As I walked away, I heard Aunt Lorraine whisper to someone, "That girl is not who we thought she was." She was right. And they were only beginning to understand how little they had actually known about the woman they had spent years underestimating. The revelation was just the beginning. What came next would change everything. I did not sleep well that night. After leaving the reunion, I drove the long way home, windows down, letting the summer air clear my head. When I finally walked into my apartment, I sat at my small kitchen table and pulled out an old journal I kept tucked in a drawer. Inside was a folded letter in my mother's handwriting, written the week I dropped out of law school. Kira, this is not the path we imagined for you. We are worried. Real estate is unstable. Law is a profession. Please be careful not to waste your potential. I did not blame her for writing it. In our family, value is measured in titles and degrees, in things you could brag about at dinner parties. My mother had spent her whole life trying to fit that mold, and she wanted to protect me from what she saw as failure. But she had never understood that I was not running away from potential. I was running towards something she could not see. The truth was, my journey started in the wreckage of my divorce. At 29 years old, I walked away from a marriage with almost nothing. My ex-husband kept the house, the furniture, the life we had built together. I moved into a cramped apartment in Stamford, with a suitcase and a bank account that had $3,000 in it. Most people would have called that rock bottom. I called it freedom. For the first time in my life, nobody was watching. Nobody was judging. Nobody cared what I did next. And so I started learning. I enrolled in real estate development courses at the community college. I volunteered for local housing nonprofits. I showed up at zoning board meetings and sat in the back row, taking notes while developers argued over variances and density bonuses. I shadowed property managers and asked 1,000 questions. I read every book I could find on investment strategy, tenant law, and construction management. By the time I was 31, I had saved enough for a down payment on my first property, a rundown duplex in Bridgeport that nobody else wanted. The roof leaked. The pipes were ancient. The previous owner had left it abandoned for 2 years. But I saw potential. I lived in one half and rented out the other. I learned how to fix drywall, replace faucets, and negotiate with contractors who thought they could overcharge a woman who did not know better. I made mistakes. I overpaid for materials. I trusted the wrong people. But I learned fast, and I reinvested every single dollar of profit. For 6 years, I did not take a vacation. I did not eat at restaurants unless someone else was paying. I drove my Honda until the odometer hit 200,000 miles. While my cousins posted photos from Tuscany and Napa Valley, I was walking construction sites in steel-toed boots, reviewing budgets in coffee shops, and attending city council meetings until midnight. They had no idea. And I never told them, because the moment I started doing something unexpected, it would have become a target. They would have found ways to diminish it, to turn my success into a punchline. So, I built in silence. By 33, I had flipped 3 properties and owned 2 small apartment buildings. By 35, I had established Whitestone Equity as a legitimate firm with a reputation for ethical development and community-focused housing. And then the pandemic hit. While the world panicked, I saw an opportunity. Property values dropped. Sellers were desperate. And Whitaker residences came on the market at a price I could finally afford. When I saw the address, my stomach turned. I ran a tenant background check and discovered that my aunt, my uncle, my cousin, even my parents were living there. They had all downsized quietly, too proud to tell anyone in the family that they were struggling. I could have walked away. But instead, I bought the building. Not to trap them or control them, but to protect them. Rent increases in that area were pushing longtime residents out. I did not want that to happen to my family, even if they had spent years making me feel small. I stabilized the rents. I extended lease renewals. I quietly absorbed repair costs that I could have passed on to tenants. And I never said a word. Until now. Until I was finally strong enough to let them see what I had built. Not for their approval, but for my own peace. 3 days after the reunion, my property manager called. Her voice was hesitant, apologetic. Kira, we have a situation with Unit 3. Aunt Lorraine's rent check bounced again. That is the 3rd time in 6 months. She is 2 months behind now. I closed my eyes and leaned back in my office chair. Of course she was. Aunt Lorraine, who had spent decades flaunting her wealth and judging everyone else's financial choices, was quietly drowning. Has she said anything? I asked. She is embarrassed. She has been avoiding our calls. I thought about all the times she had made comments about my clothes, my car, my choices. I thought about the way she whispered to my mother at Thanksgiving that I was wasting my life. I could have used this moment to prove a point, to let her feel the weight of her own judgment. Instead, I said, cover her rent for the next 6 months. Call it a temporary hardship assistance program. Do not mention my name. Just tell her she qualified based on her tenure and payment history. There was silence on the other end of the line. Are you sure? My manager asked. I am not here to punish people, I said quietly. I am here to keep them housed. That same week, Harper reached out. She sent a short email with the subject line, "Can we talk?" I almost ignored it. But curiosity got the better of me. I sent her a video call link. She showed up on screen with no makeup, hair pulled back, looking more vulnerable than I had ever seen her. I owe you an apology, she said before I could even say hello. I was not expecting one, I replied honestly. Well, you deserve it. I looked you up. Whitestone Equity, your projects, the work you have done. I had no idea, Kira. And I am sorry for treating you like you did not matter. Her voice cracked on the last word. Thank you for saying that, I said. She hesitated, then asked, do you think people like me can change? I considered the question carefully. That depends. Are you willing to unlearn everything that made you feel superior? She nodded slowly. I think I already started. A few days later, she showed up at my office with a notebook and a coffee. I want to learn what you do, she said. How you do it. Not so I can compete with you, but because I want to build something that actually matters. I handed her a stack of tenant feedback reports from our properties. Read these, I said. Every single comment. Understand who you are serving. Not just their complaints, but their lives. She looked surprised. No spreadsheets? Not yet. First, you learn to care. Then you learn the numbers. By the end of the week, Harper was different. Still sharp, still confident, but softer somehow. She asked real questions about zoning laws, rent control, sustainable development. She read about community land trusts and affordable housing models. One afternoon, she looked up from the city planning map on my wall. When you told us you owned the building, I thought you just wanted to rub it in our faces, she admitted. And now? I asked. Now I see that you have been protecting us this whole time, even when we did not deserve it. I did not respond. Some truths do not need confirmation. They just need space to land. 2 weeks later, I received an invitation to speak at a city development forum on ethical urban growth. They wanted someone to discuss female-led firms investing in inclusive housing. For the first time, my name would not be hidden behind an LLC. It would be front and center. I almost declined. Years of moving in silence had made visibility feel dangerous. But another part of me, the part that used to sit at the kids' table while my cousins laughed, was ready. The day of the forum, I wore a navy dress and my favorite scuffed flats. Not because I could not afford better, but because I did not need to prove anything anymore. I spoke for 15 minutes about building communities, not just collecting rent. About protecting tenants instead of maximizing profit. About legacy versus wealth. The applause was warm and genuine. Afterward, someone from the mayor's office approached me. We would like to work with you, he said. The city needs more developers who actually care about people. When I got home that evening, there was a letter waiting on my doorstep. Handwritten. My mother's looping script. Kira, I watched the recording of your talk tonight. I cried halfway through. I realize now I did not just underestimate you. I did not see you. Not really. I was too focused on who I thought you should be to appreciate who you were becoming. Your father and I are so proud. We always should have been. Love, Mom. I read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in the box where I kept my old blueprints and notebooks. The following weekend, we held our first tenant appreciation event at the community garden near Whitaker Residences. Fairy lights, music, food, laughter. Harper helped organize it. My parents came, bringing homemade brownies. Even Aunt Lorraine showed up. As I stood on a small platform under the canopy of lights, I looked out at the crowd. Families, neighbors, people who trusted me with their homes. Real success is not about square footage or price tags, I said. It is about repaired roofs and safe hallways. It is about neighbors who know each other's names. I used to think legacy was something you inherited. Now I know it is something you create, brick by brick, lease by lease, story by story. The applause was soft but real. Later, as the event wound down, Aunt Lorraine approached me quietly. "I heard what you did with the rent," she said, voice uncertain. "Thank you, and I am sorry for how we treated you." I nodded. "Thank you for saying that." She paused, then added, "Your grandfather would be proud, you know." I smiled. "I hope so." That night, I returned to my old apartment and sat on the floor. I opened my notebook and wrote, "Legacy is not in the name on the building, but in the lives inside it." I did not set out to prove anyone wrong. I set out to prove something to myself. That kindness is not weakness. That quiet work matters. And in the end, I did not need them to see me. I just needed to be me. If this story moved you, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe in building legacies that matter, subscribe for more stories like this. Thank you for listening.